Yeah.
All right. Okay, we're going live. We'll do it live. Hello, if we're already there. We may not already. It sometimes takes a second to be there. Are we there?
I don't see it yet. I see it now.
All right. Hello. How's it going, everybody? This is part 7. Yes, part 7 of JSFX Scripting for beginners like myself. And we have with us, as always, Leandro.
Hello, everyone. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
So, Leandro, today we're, I guess, looking at, as teased last time, we're looking at how to make our JSFX stereo, or let's not say stereo, let's say multi-channel up to 64 channels if we need to, which is good. It's better than just the old stereo fix. It'll be a lot more useful, kind of across the board. So that is what we're here to do. Now, something that I should have set up and I totally forgot was my Git situation that you showed me on your live stream. But yeah, it's just been a week of not really having time to do anything.
I understand. I get that.
Yeah.
It has been the same way over here.
Also, now I gotta remember which of my 100 different versions of the same plugins that I did we write the old function on. Maybe I called it function or something.
While you're finding that, hi, Bo. It's great to have you here. And as a recap, what we did last time was we extracted a piece of code, a block of code, into a user-defined function. So we have a function that we have written. Usually we use the functions that come with ReaFIR. This time we wrote our own, and we did that so that we could have multiple filters. So our EQ is no longer a single band. Now we can have multiple bands. And that was necessary because this EQ is kind of a game, and in one stage of the game, we wanted to have multiple filters. And then the person would have to guess, oh, this is both a low-pass filter as well as a bandpass or whatever.
Yeah. Also, what do you think, should I, because yeah, we wrote this in like a test function JSFX. Do you think I should just copy this over to the whole EQ right now, or?
Well, I won't pretend to understand your organization right now. You have plenty of versions of the effect, and you're experimenting with different things. And I don't think we even talked about all the experiments. For instance, you have done some graphical user interface using a library.
Yeah.
And we didn't really talk about this. So I don't know how you want to manage this.
Yeah.
What I do know is that, as far as I remember, the last time we wrote this function and it works. So you can be confident that you can copy and paste it and it should probably work.
Yes.
But it depends on some constants, and yeah, it has to be wired into the rest of the effects.
Right. Yes.
I'm not sure what you want to do.
Exactly. I don't know if this will break everything. I mean, definitely bringing that function in won't do anything, so I did that bit. And then here, let's see how they are different. On the sample block, these are all the same. Boop, boop, boop. We had to do something to the YN, I guess.
Yes, so YN is the output of the first filter.
Right.
And what we used to do with YN was to just spit it out. That was the sample that we produced. But then when we have multiple filters, then YN is an input to the second filter, and the output of the second filter goes out as our output. So that will have to change in the sample block of wherever you want to copy the function to.
Right. So I think this will actually audio-wise at least work. I am wondering if this will make the point system fail. So, yeah. So it probably will, actually. Because in the... So right now what we're doing, in the slider block, user chooses a difficulty. If user chooses the easy difficulty, then these are the values that will go to the filter. So in this case, I guess we can plug these values into our function.
Yes.
Yeah.
These values are the inputs
Yeah.
to the function.
So I think that'll work. We'll put dB gain here. We'll put frequency here. We'll put Q here, even though did I actually define the Q in the thing, or did I just call it 1 to start with? Yeah, it seems like I have not chosen a Q, and I just in the init block said that Q is 1. So whatever, it's Q. And the rest is okay. So I guess let's test it up to this point and make sure
I don't think that... I have to think about this, but I don't think that the order is correct, is it? The block that reads xn2 equals xn1 and so forth.
Oh, all of those
shouldn't
have
that
to
appear
be
before?
Above, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, just double checking. While you do that, Bo is asking something on the chat. Can you quickly explain how to do a full compile reset? I'm not sure I understand. I know that there is a button on the upper right. Yeah, and the purpose of this button is to zero out the variables in the program, and then it's going to start your effect over. So it's as if you have just dropped the effect into a track. The purpose of this is that sometimes you are writing code and you change variables and you change code and you change how the code manipulates the variables, and then you end up in a bad state, which is just because when you are changing the code and saving and changing the code and saving, ReaFIR will not start from a clean slate. It will just continue running with the new code. All the variables that existed will continue to exist with their values. So that's why there is this button there. It is pretend that I just dropped this effect into a track. But you don't have to click that often. Usually you just change code and you save, and by saving, ReaFIR will recompile and start running the effect. I'm not sure I understand the question, but does that answer the question? Let me know.
I can give another example too, which is as I was testing the point system, I had to modify the code. So I could save the code, but then the points will remain the same from my previous test. So it would be like 1 correct point, 2 total questions. So with a full recompile reset, also those parameters are made 0 so that you can do, if you have any kind of thing like that in your effect, which I don't know how many effects have a point system, but that's another way that I saw. Leandro, I have a quick question. Why did we put this line up here?
I don't know. Let's think and remember if it even makes sense. So the idea here is that we want xn to be our current sample, xn1 to be the previous sample, and xn2 to be the previous 2 previous samples, so 2 samples ago. That's just the way that the formula works in the filter equation. So we need to have these variables with these names there. So I guess this is correct, and the way it works is when you start running the sample block, the first thing you will do is you will copy the value of xn1
Uh-huh.
into xn2, but we have not defined xn1 in this run of the block. It still has the value that it had on the previous run of the block. So xn1 used to be the previous sample one sample ago. Now it is two samples ago.
Oh,
Does that make sense?
yeah, I got you.
Okay. Yeah, so now we have xn1, which is two samples ago. We assign that to xn2. And the same holds for xn. Xn, one sample ago, it was the current sample. Now it is the previous sample. So we say that xn1 is equal to xn. So we are doing that thing where we use the variables before we define them, but that's all right because the sample block is a loop. So the variable has been defined in the previous execution of the loop. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I always like as soon as you said loop, I was like, yeah, because the sample block is a loop, and it doesn't look like a classic loop, or it doesn't look like a loop in Lua, but it is a loop. And then as soon as I like realized that, I'm like, okay.
Yeah, and a loop is a great segue for what we are going to do today. The purpose of today, the support for multi-channel, is all about loops. And Bo follows up. You've mentioned it in a video, and I've noticed I need to reboot ReaFIR to have some change take place. So I guess the full compile reset would do the same thing. Yeah, rebooting ReaFIR is heavy-handed. Here are some things you can try first. If you see that you have some variable stuck with the wrong value, you can tell that the value is wrong by looking at the right pane. You will find your variable there and it will have an outdated value. You want that value to be updated for whatever reason. Like in Aria's case, the score is wrong and you want the score to be reset. So if you just save and it doesn't reset, then go to the full recompile reset button, click on it. That will probably work. If that doesn't work, close the effect, remove it from the track, and drop the effect on the track again. That should load the plugin from the file system, and it should reset all the variables. And if I guess that's the end of the line. Well, I guess the end of the line is to reset ReaFIR, but that's heavy-handed. You shouldn't have to do that. And I would even venture to say that in JSFX, you cannot crash ReaFIR. I don't think I have ever crashed ReaFIR. You can always write an effect that it's so slow that ReaFIR will be slow. It will be super slow, and you hear the artifacts and you hear clicks. But unlike Lua, I don't think you can crash ReaFIR using JSFX. You can crash ReaFIR using Lua. I have done that in my stream, several times. But even then, it's very hard, but it's possible. From JSFX, I don't think it's even possible. Yeah, the way you can think about it is the JSFX run in this protected environment. The same way that a browser tab shouldn't be able to crash your browser. At most, a browser tab will be slow and you will close the tab and you continue your work. But the browser tab, the code executing in the browser from a website shouldn't be able to crash the browser. Same story here. It runs in a sandbox, a controlled environment. A JSFX shouldn't be able to crash ReaFIR or even to freeze ReaFIR in a way that you wouldn't be able to go and delete the effect from the track and recover from that weird state, right?
Yeah, and you can also what you can do with JSFX is blow up your speakers. Definitely possible. Or
yes,
not really.
even then ReaFIR has some protection in place. It tries to mute a track if it gets too loud, but before it muted the track, you may be deaf. So yeah, be careful.
Yeah. Okay, so it seems like what we have going on working. I just need to figure out a way for the easy mode to have this filter be bypassed, because even if the dB gain of this second filter is 0, it seems to be doing something. So I need to find basically a filter that just doesn't do anything when it is not supposed to.
Yeah, so here are some ideas on how to do this. I will present some ideas that I have, and then you can find the one that you like the most. One idea is we can wire. Currently the wiring is X, the samples that are called X, those are the current samples, go into the first filter, and then Y comes out, and then we wire Y into the second filter, and then Z comes out, and that's what we wire into the output. We can change the wiring. We can say, if you don't want a second filter, you can have X goes into the filter, Y comes out, and then we have one of those conditional checks. Are we on easy mode? Are we on hard mode? Do we need a second filter? If so, then do the wiring of Z.
Oh.
That's one way of doing this.
Okay.
Right?
Okay. So
another idea.
Oh, sorry. Go on.
Sorry. Go ahead.
No. You keep going, and then I'll ask my questions.
Okay. So the second idea that I have, probably there are more ideas on how to implement this, but the other idea that I have is we can have a filter type which doesn't do anything. It's a filter type that is a bypass. And we will have to come up with our own equation to how to do a bypass. But I think it's straightforward. I think it will be just xn multiplied by 1, and then all the a's and b's that are our coefficients are just zeros. So I think that a0 will be 1, and a1, a2, b0, b1, b2 are all zeros, and I think you end up with a bypass.
I like the conditional thing a little more. Yeah, I feel like I like the conditional situation more. So, and that we would write like here, right? So you would say like difficulty and I gave all the difficulties names, and did I name them straightforwardly or something weird? No, yeah, I did it weird, or I did it normally. So if difficulty is easy, then basically SPL 0, and we're gonna mess with this in a second. SPL 1 equals YN, and we circumvent the whole EQ that way. And I'll do it Leandro style. Like this, else difficulty is medium, then this stuff, and else for now we do nothing.
Oh, you know what I just learned? I was rereading some code from my previous effects. I don't even remember what I was looking for, but what I remember by reading my own code is that you don't need this do nothing thing. If you don't have any column, if you just have a semicolon there and you end the conditional, it works fine.
So nothing.
You are
from
not
this
required
line.
to always have. Yeah, so you just change this the column to a semicolon on the previous line.
Oh, so that's the end of the conditional.
There you go. Yeah, that works as well.
Cool. I'll do that.
Yeah, you have that in other places because I was misremembering the syntax. But yeah, there you go.
Cool. Good to know. Bo says, oh, any news on the Worrell phase idea? So Bo's idea was that, do you know Dan Worrell? He's like a viral. He's a celebrity of the ReaFIR world now.
Yeah, I remember reading that email, and I'm so late on my emails, but I am all in to do the live stream together or some other form of collaboration. I love doing that.
Yeah, I mean, if Dan Worrell even wants to look in my direction, I will 100% take it. You know, there's stuff like that where I'm very shy. I'm like, why would anybody want to work with me? So I think I thought about writing Leandro literally like maybe in January or something, and it took me like 4 months to be like, I should just email him. Like, worst case scenario, he says no. So I'm yeah, I'm shy and really bad, and I'm always just thinking like, why would anybody want to work with me? I know nothing. But if he is down to be on this live stream any day of the week, any time of the month, I will, I will take away from my sleep. I will cut into my sleeping time or eating time to be in the presence of Dan Worrell. So you said, Bo, you have a way of contacting him. Like, yeah, we are in if he's in.
Yeah, I take a while because I have so many things going on and I'm always busy, but I am always in to do these sorts of things. Yes.
I'm just gonna turn on my fan because it's getting crazy hot.
All right. Okay. So while Arya is doing that, yeah, I was trying to remember what the effect even was that we were going to do with Worrell, but yeah, let's continue the EQ before we dive into the next effect.
I was gonna test if this now works, since we are in easy. Seems not to, but I don't know. Let's make it stereo, and then we'll figure out that other stuff. Or maybe this is the time for a full recompile and reset. And nope. Okay.
Yeah, that's the other virtue of the full compile reset. It does get you out of stuck variables, but that's uncommon. Actually, the most often I click on full compile reset out of hope. I think, well, I think that a full compile reset will fix this, and it never does. But I always click on it, and I always hope for the best. So that button should have a different label. It should read full compile reset in parentheses hope.
I was gonna see if this fixes it, but no. Okay, so I'll kind of try and dig in and see what's going on.
What is the issue? What is wrong?
The issue is, so in the easy mode, we shouldn't hear two filters. We should just hear one filter. But just from the spectral analyzer, I can see that both filters are active. So yeah, so that's what's going on right now.
Yeah, that is weird. I don't really know why that would be. By just looking at the code, it does seem like you are only going through one of the filters.
Yeah. So, yeah, really trying to think. I don't know, but let's make it stereo, and I'll play around with it a little bit. Yeah.
And in which effect do you want to make it stereo? Do you want to use this version, or do you think that it's slightly broken and you want to go to a different one?
That's a good question. What would you do?
I want a version that at least we can tell is working. I mean, I don't care about the difficulty levels. I don't really care about multiple filters running or just a single filter running, but we need to be confident that the thing is doing what we want it to do.
Well, this test function that we wrote yesterday, that one I think works perfectly fine. It's supposed to have two filters, and it does.
All right. Okay. Cool. Whatever version you want to do, you are in charge of managing versions.
Okay. I definitely shouldn't be, but I am. I also think maybe, I don't know, I just copied the code into a wrong thing. I don't know. I made myself go nuts with all this stuff. I got to do some cleanup. So yeah, let's just use this bad boy, which is somewhere over here. There it is. And this works.
Okay. All right. So let's get into, oh, before we get into multi-channel, you said that you had a question and I finished talking, and then I think we even answered Bo's question, but I never got to your question. What was your question?
That's a good question. It'll come to me. If it came to me, I'll let you know.
Okay, so let's start the conversation about multi-channel. And let's start with the easy thing that we sort of know how to do and that works and that most plugins do. What most plugins do is that they are not multi-channel, they're just stereo. And the way that they work is they copy and paste a lot of code. So in our sample block, we have these lines that have X and Y and Z, and they all have to do with sample 0. So if you forget about the last line, they are all about sample 0. In other words, they are all about the left channel. So we know how to do this. We can copy and paste this block of code and rename the variables. So we no longer have X and 2. We will have XL and 2 for left, XR and 2 for right. And then you rename all the variables consistently, and you end up with 2 separate chains of, well, I guess filtering in this case. And then in the end, you don't say SPL0 equals SPL1 equals ZN. You say SPL0 equals ZLN for the left channel. And then you do the same for SPL1 equals ZRN. Okay, so just by having said this, I think that we can all imagine what the code would look like, right?
Yeah.
You just copy and paste, rename a bunch of variables, and it works.
Right.
And it's great. It works. And in many situations, this is all you want, and you can move on with your life. That's fine. But how about we get into multi-channel? And the reason for that is, first, I don't like having to copy and paste code and rename variables, because then later when I want to change something about the behavior or the functionality, I have to remember to do everything consistently in both the left and the right channels, or I will end up with a broken effect. So I don't like copying and pasting code because of that. But also, why limit ourselves to 2 channels? What if you want to train your ears to be able to tell filters apart on a 5.1 setting, on surround sound? Why do we want to limit this to a single or to 2 channels? And the code that we are going to write will fix both problems. It will not have repetition of code. The code will be slightly more complicated, but it will not repeat. And we will support however many channels you want to have, which is, I think, is a great deal. And how do we do that? Well, as I said before, with a loop. ReaFIR gives us a way to tell how many channels there are in the track or in the item on which this effect is applied. It's one of those special variables. It's the system variables. You can see it on the right pane if you scroll and look for num underscore ch for channels, number of channels. You'll find that variable, and it will give you the number of channels on this track.
There it is. Yeah.
So 2 channels. And if you want to give this a try, you can change the number of channels on the routing of this track, and you'll see that number change. Or you can just trust me, whatever you want to do.
I trust.
In any case, okay, so we have the number of channels on this. So how about we write a loop that will loop through each channel? And then we just apply the effect on each channel. That's the story. That's what we are going to do. We are going to write a loop. So now this will be an explicit loop. The sample block is an implicit loop. We know that it runs on a loop, but we don't see any loop constructs. We don't write any code that looks like a loop. As you said before, it doesn't look like a loop in Lua. What we are going to write now will look like a loop in Lua.
Cool.
But it will use ReaFIR's weird syntax for that. So let's talk about the syntax for this. There is a function. It's one of the functions that come with JSFX. It comes with ReaFIR. There is a function that is called loop.
Okay.
And that runs a block of code in a loop. So I think that the best way to learn the syntax is to start from scratch. So can you make a a temporary effect somewhere so we can write some code.
Sure.
And then we start with a clean slate.
Sure.
And then we are going to do the thing we did in previous streams, or we play around with the fundamental basic blocks, and then we learn how they work, and then we go ahead and try to apply that idea to the bigger effect.
It just occurred to me that I should be naming these based on the episode 2, and then I can also give these bits of code to people and get rid of everything, I assume?
Yes. Let's just have an init block.
Okay.
I want to run the code only once, so I'm going to use the init block. If I wanted to run the code often, I would use the sample block. Okay, so let's understand how the loop function works. I think it could be beneficial for you to open the documentation for this so we can actually take a look at it. I don't think it will be super useful, but it doesn't hurt to learn how I got to learn these things in the first place, right? I learned from reading the ReaFIR documentation for JSFX.
There we are. Hopefully that's big enough.
So there is a whole section.
Okay.
There is a whole section about loops.
Loops. Yep.
Yeah. And there are different ways to loop. And the way that I think we will use on this stream is going to be the first one. It's called loop. Just so you know, here are the different versions. The loop version is going to run the loop. It's a block of code that is going to run several times. And you have to know how many times you want to run it ahead of time. And in this case, we do know how many times we want to run this code. We want to run for whatever is the number of channels. So if you know ahead of time, I'm running this the number of channels times, then you can go ahead and use loop. But in some cases, you may not know ahead of time how many times you want to run the loop. Maybe the block of code that you're going to run will determine whether it needs to run again or not. In that case, you can use while, which is the thing right below. And these are the only two flavors of looping. So if you know ahead of time how many times you want to run a loop, use the loop construct. If you don't know, you can use while. And yeah, that's the story. So
I'm assuming like if we are making a gate, we would probably need a while loop. Like while it's at some level, shut it off, and then otherwise it's on.
Yeah, that's an excellent question because it helps me clarify something. So what we are doing is a loop in one sample. So not in this this JSFX part 7 that we have that is empty right now. We're just going to play around with the loop construct to understand how it works. But eventually when we get to use the loop on the EQ, our purpose is a sample comes in. And a sample is on the @sample block. It is not just a sample on the left channel. It's one sample per channel. And what we are doing is, given a single point in time, so if you have one of those items with the multiple waveforms for all the channels, you know what I mean? When you look at the item on the ReaFIR timeline, you can imagine that what we are running in the sample block is one of these slices, just a single sample, and we have access to each of the little dots, each of the little dots representing the different channels in that item. So what I'm saying here is the @sample block will run for every point in time. Yes, that's what I mean, the thing you're showing right now. So the sample block will run for each of these in time going from left to right. That's what the sample block already does for us. We don't have to write explicit code to loop over time. But the loop that we are writing is to loop over the different channels in a single point in time. So we are writing an explicit loop to run some code that will process the first dot on the first line, and then the dot on the line below, and so on and so forth. But that's all in a single point in time. So on a gate, what you do is you over time. You may have an attack or a hysteresis or whatever, but that's over time. So you don't need the loop construct to do that because the sample block is already a loop in and of itself. It's a loop over time. We are interested in a loop over, I guess, space.
I see. Oh yeah, because I was wondering about that as well. Assuming that we do the quote unquote lazy way of coding this, where we copy the code, then theoretically, as the sample block is running, there's a maybe very small, but an existing delay in terms of like when the sample left and the right sample are processed, right? Like it does those first 10 lines, then it does the second 10 lines. So therefore it is, you know what I mean? Like, since the code is running in a loop, we are technically, if we just copy the code, we are processing the samples from each channel in different times.
Yeah, I missed most of what you said because Skype was misbehaving. But I think that what you are asking is if we do the copy and paste way of getting stereo, not multi-channel, but just stereo, then are we losing any synchronicity between the samples on the left and on the right channel? Is that your question?
Yeah, that was the question, yeah.
Okay, so the answer is that no, we are not losing any timing because then we have to dive a little deeper into how ReaFIR actually runs your JS effects. The way that it works is it is going to work in blocks. Even though we have an add sample block that runs on every sample, internally what ReaFIR is doing is it takes a block of maybe 256 samples or however many samples you have in your block size, and it takes a block and it runs your code. So it runs the sample block 256 times, and it produces a block to output on the speakers, and then it goes on to the next one. So it is not running in real time along with the audio coming through the speakers. No. So in your add sample block, you have a guarantee that SPL0 and SPL1 and SPL however many samples you have, because you may have more than 2 channels. So however many channels you have, you will be guaranteed that those samples occur in a single point in time. They occur together.
Okay. I have 2 follow-up questions about this actually. So the first one is that, okay, so with the block size, say our block size is 512. Is that 512 per channel of audio? So if we, or is it that if I put a quad file in there, then it's actually 128 samples per channel of my quad audio file? Do you know what I mean?
I understand, and I am not 100% confident on my answer, but I'm 90% confident that the block size is the number of blocks over time. So if you have a mono file and your block size is 512, you have 512 samples in your block. But if you have a stereo file, then you have 1,028 samples. You have double the amount of samples in your block because the block size is the number of samples over time.
Okay, got you. Cool.
Which means that if your block size is 512, you have a fixed latency. Your latency will be your sample rate divided by your block size. That will be your latency. So it will be the same. It doesn't matter if you plug in a mono microphone or a desk with 200 channels. It doesn't matter. The latency will be fixed. Of course, you will need a bigger computer to run more channels because you need to process more stuff, but the latency will be fixed.
And then my second question is, okay, this probably sounds really dumb if you know a lot about audio, at least about like the underlying code of it. But is it possible to make a JSFX force a block size that is not the same as your project? So as an example, could I, on the channel where I am streaming my voice through, could I have a plugin that forces a different block size, and then on my project I can have a different block size? Or does that just sound like...
That's an interesting question. As far as I understand, you cannot from JSFX, and I don't think that you can even, I'm not sure, I don't know too much about VSTs and audio units, but I don't think that even VSTs and audio units have that capability of changing the block size on the host, on the in ReaFIR in this case. I don't think that that can happen, but in many effects, it makes sense to process stuff in different block sizes. For instance, what we are doing right now, you can imagine that our EQ has a block size of 3 samples. We look at 3 samples at a time. And in effects like ReaFIR, we talked about ReaFIR, I guess, 6 or 7 episodes ago. It is an effect that uses this black box. It's a magical function. It's called a fast Fourier transform. But the fast Fourier transform needs to work with a block of samples. And the block of samples, you can control the size. You can open ReaFIR and you can say, I want a sample block of 2,000 samples. But your project or even your audio interface is running at 256. So what gives? How can that effect have a different block size? Well, it's not changing the block size with respect to ReaFIR. It's not changing the block size with respect to your hardware. It's not changing the block size even with respect to how ReaFIR will run the sample block. Remember how I said that ReaFIR will get a block of samples and it will run your sample code. So the sample block, it will run that for every sample, and then it will produce a chunk of audio that it will output. You cannot change that. That stays fixed. That's the sample block. That's the sample, the block size. Sorry, that's the block size that you configured in ReaFIR. There is no way to change that. But what in your effect, you can accumulate samples, and you can remember samples from previous blocks. And then you can use the samples that you have stored to, for instance, feed to IQ, feed to an FFT implementation, or whatever you need to do. For instance, if you have a delay, maybe you just store a bunch of samples and replay them later.
Cool.
That sort of thing. So that is something that we will have to code. In fact, we are going to write something to that effect today. Okay, so yeah, we were talking about loops. So now we know that we already have in place a loop over time. That's our sample block of code. So it's already looping over time. We don't have to write that loop, but we do need to write the loop over space. Let's break out this frontier and talk about the space continuum. So there are 2 ways to loop, the loop and the while. And in this case, we know how many times we want to run the loop. It's num channels. It's the number of channels. So we're going to use loop. And then we use loop by passing 2 things. The first is a count. That's how many times we want to run the loop. For instance, in the example in the documentation, it's going to run the loop 32 times. Then we need to pass a block of code that is going to run. So the second argument to the loop function is super weird. It does not receive as argument a value. It does not receive a number, and it's the only kind of, that number is the only kind of value in JSFX. But in Lua, you can imagine that a function would receive as argument a string, a piece of text. It would receive a Boolean, true or false, that sort of thing. No, this function doesn't receive, the second argument is not a value. It is a block of code. Isn't that crazy? So it's a block of code. And ReaFIR will look at this and it will say, okay, I will run this block of code 32 times. And then I'm going to move on. So let's write an example like this and we can see it in action. So go ahead and write loop, and as the first argument, pass number of channels, which we know to be 2
Oh, just
in
write
this case.
2?
No.
Okay.
Say number of channels, num channel.
Num ch,
Yeah. and then comma, and then the next argument is going to be a block of code. So in our block of code, what do? How about we start with something simple? Before the loop, write something like a equals 0. And then in the loop, you can say a plus equals 1. And then you can close the loop. And then distribute the semicolons everywhere on the line that starts, yes, that line and the other line. Okay, so now save this. But before you do, can you imagine what we are going to see on the right pane when we look at the a variable? What do you expect a to be?
It's 0 now, it's going to be 2 once we're done with it, I guess.
Yep, so save and let's see.
Oh, it's not showing up because we haven't saved it, so plap. 0
so
though.
The value of a is 0. I have no idea why. It should be 2, I think. Let's think about how we can verify that the loop is even running.
Is it because the number of like we're running it in the init block, but we're supposed to be running it in another block? That's always my go-to.
I don't think so. I don't think so. Let's try to just say, instead of number of channels, let's say just a fixed number, like the number 2. I don't think that would change anything, but it doesn't hurt to try. That changed something, so I'm not sure. Maybe the number of channels isn't available for the init block. I remember running into something weird like this in the past.
What if we do something like this and then plug that in? No, that didn't work.
Oh yeah, so I'm looking at the docs for the num channel. By the way, you can also go there if you want. I think it's helpful to show where I'm pulling these things from. So there is a section of the manual that's called special variables. And that describes most of the things we see on the right pane where it says system variables. That's where this is documented. And you can find number of channels in there. And it says context. Context is the blocks where you can use this variable. And it says most contexts, but not all, most. So sample rate, the thing right above, S rate, it says context available everywhere. So you can use S rate in any block, but number of channels you can only use in some blocks. Let's see which blocks. It specifies the number of channels available, usually 2, because usually tracks are stereo. Note, however, that the samples are still available. They are always 0. And they're ignored. And you can change the channel count available in pin and out pin lines, but it doesn't really say in which contexts this is available.
Well, it says see comments. Are these the comments or is something else the comments?
I don't know. So that's the thing about the documentation for ReaFIR. It does not always explain everything.
Yeah, that's definitely been... Sometimes I read it, I'm like, I know less about whatever it was that I had the question of.
Yeah, I skimmed the rest of this doc, and it doesn't really seem to explain. But I think we learned that when it says most contexts, the init block is not one of them.
Yeah.
Right? Did you save this? Put a semicolon right after the num channel, so this line is executed, and save this.
Still didn't work.
It seems like num is 0. So maybe the number of channels is not available to us in the init block. Just change init to read like slider. I think it will be available in the slider section.
And no.
Nope. Give it a try. Maybe the sample block will have
it's gotta be block
I'm
or
sure the
sample,
block
right?
must have.
Yeah. Whoop-itty-do. Yep. Cool.
There you go. Now, what's interesting about this is that the number of channels is available, yes, but also what's interesting about this is that the sample block is running in a loop, so the value of A is changing In fact, I think that if you remove the line that reads a equals 0 and resave, we will see a incrementing.
Ooh, yeah.
See? Because it's running a loop. All right, and that's why I didn't want to have this sample code in the, or this experiment in the sample block, because it keeps running. But that's all right. So now we know how to use loop. We know that we can use loop by giving it a number of times and a block to run. And the block currently has a single line, the a plus equals 1, but the block could have multiple lines, like in the example in the documentation. We looked at an example that had multiple lines. There you go. So that's how you write a loop. Now, what do we want to do with the loop? We want to loop over the number of channels, and we want to process the samples. We want to process SPL0, SPL1, and SPL and so forth, right? Okay, so how about we have a counter that gives us the current channel, the channel that we're processing right now. It is similar in spirit to our a variable. It starts with the number 0 because we start by processing SPL0. And then for the number of channels, it is going to be incremented.
Okay.
Right? So maybe just rename. Instead of saying a equals 0, say maybe it's not a, maybe it's like current channel index.
Sure. And it's 0 right now.
Yeah. And then you also have to change the a plus equals 1 to read current channel index plus equals 1.
Sometimes this auto suggesting just stops working, which is very weird. But all right. And I guess this bit of code is no longer relevant, so I'll just do this.
That's fine. And then we have all the setup we need. We start with sample 0. Then for the number of channels, we increment the current channel index. So in this block of code, the current channel index is right. It gives us the index of the channel. Now, how do we use this? We need to learn something about the special variables. It's in fact the first thing that is documented in the basic functionality section of the special variables. So far, we have looked at samples by using SPL0, SPL1, and so forth. We have used that in two ways. We have used SPL0 and 1 to read the value, which is the sound coming into our effect. And we have assigned to SPL0 and 1 to change the output of our effect, right? Well, that's not the only way to access the samples for the different channels. Instead of saying SPL0, which is a special variable, you can also use the thing right below, SPL as a function. And then that's a function. So it receives as argument the index of the channel we care about. It's a different way of doing exactly the same thing, of accessing the different samples, both to read as well as to write. But it's just a different way of writing this. Instead of saying SPL0, you can say SPL open parens.
Current channel index.
Whatever, close parens. Yes. So let's go ahead and do that.
SPL of current channel index and close.
That's excellent. Now, this needs to be in the block of code in the loop. And right now it isn't, because the close parens that you have right after the line right there, that close parens is closing the block. So now you are reading the sample in the block, in the loop. And that's all right. You need some semicolons, but other than that, it's okay.
I need one here, and I need one here.
Yes. Now let's think through the order in which these things run. First, current channel index equals 0 runs, right? That's the first line. Then you get into the loop. And then the first line of the loop reads current channel index plus equals 1. So now, what is the value of current channel index? It will be 1. So the first sample we look at is SPL of 1, which is the right hand side. It's the right channel. So we skipped the first. Right? So there are two ways to fix this. Can you think of, or at least two ways, probably there are more, but can you think of a way of fixing this?
Make current channel index -1 at the beginning?
Yes, that's one way of doing this.
Okay.
Go ahead and do that. Actually, that's the way that I prefer to do. That's my preferred way. If you look at my code, I always do it like this. You can also, that's just the other way of doing this, you can reverse the lines. Instead of current channel index being the first line in the loop, it can be the last line in the loop. That will work out as well.
Like put it here, but it's 0?
No, if you start with current channel index equals 0, then you can have your current channel index plus equals 1 as the last line in the loop.
Okay, so at the beginning it's 0, SPL will be 0, and then you add, and then, okay. Yeah, no preference, but cool,
I prefer your version.
-1, I like it.
Yeah, and the reason why I prefer it this way is so that you can have the whole setup for the loop in a single place. So the current channel plus equals 1 is not at the end of the loop. That could be confusing because you would have to look at the end of the loop to really understand how the loop even works. And the way that I tend to write this is a really a personal preference. I haven't seen anyone else doing this. But the way that I do it is I have it all in a single line so that the whole setup of the loop is in a single line. So my line reads kind of weird. It reads current channel index equals -1, semicolon, and then on the same line, loop open parens num channels, comma, on the same line, current channel index plus equals 1, semicolon,
so all
line
the
break.
code that we see will be on the same line, basically. Yeah,
almost. Almost all the code. And the reason why I have that is that in a single line, you can read a single line and you can understand what the loop is all about. And that's usually how you read loops in other languages like C. You would see a loop in a setup in a single line. In most cases, that's how you write a setup for a loop in a single line. Same idea, just written in a weird syntax. So there you go. Now we know how to loop over the number of channels and how to get a hold of the sample on that channel. How about we assign to the sample on that channel as well? We can do something silly. Maybe let's just do an effect that attenuates the volume. And we know how to do that. So you can say SPL0 parens current channel index equals SPL0 parens current channel index times
do that outside the loop this time though.
No, you do that inside the loop. We are changing the samples in the loop.
So SPL0 equals SPL current channel index minus 0.5 and shiplapse.
All right. Yeah, so what you just wrote there, first of all, you can remove the previous line. It doesn't do anything. It's looking at the current sample, but it's dropping it on the floor. It's not assigning. It's not doing anything. And also, what you're doing there in this line is you are assigning stuff always to SPL0.
Oh, we don't want to do that.
So it means you are only changing the left side. You are getting the audio from the right side. You are getting the audio from all your other channels, and you're always assigning to the left side. You're not changing any of the audio. So what you want to do is say SPL of current channel index equals that thing.
So this equals.
No, yeah, the thing that you go back to what you had before. Just replace SPL0 with SPL of current channel index.
Oh, okay, cool. All right.
Yeah, that's weird, right? We are using a syntax that looks like a function call, and we are assigning to that, which is absolutely crazy, but that's the way it works. There is all sorts of crazy syntax going on here. We have a loop, which receives as argument a block of code. We have a function call that is not really a function call. You can think of this as indexing into the array of
Uh-huh.
samples. That's one way of putting this. Yeah, it's a completely different and wacky syntax, but that's the way it works. And you're subtracting half, which is a DC offset. When I said that I wanted to attenuate, you multiply
That's
by
right.
half. You don't subtract half.
Oh yeah. Okay. Cool. And
All
6
right.
dB. Perfect. 6 dB is half.
Yes.
Cool.
There you go. So it's doing that for both channels. This is a stereo track. But if you had more channels, it would go and attenuate all of them. Do you want to just see this in action, or do you want to trust me?
Like change my channel count here. Let's do it for giggles. I do trust you though, and yep. And current channel will now be 3, which is computer 4, and that seems to work.
Yes.
I'll change it back though, just because I may forget, and who knows what's gonna happen.
Okay. Okay. So now I think we did it, right? The basic block is there. We are able to change multiple channels, even though we have not repeated our code. There is no Control-C, Control-V. There is no repeated code anywhere. We don't have SPL0, SPL1 hard-coded anywhere. We are not multiplying by half in 2 different places. None of that. Great, huh? But there is a next part to this story. The next part is, remember how we have xn, xn minus 1, xn minus 2, yn minus 1. The reason we have that is that we need to remember the previous samples, and we need 2 previous samples, not all the previous samples. We need to remember 1 sample ago, 2 samples ago. We need to remember our previous output, which is yn minus 1. And we need to remember 2 outputs ago, n minus 2. Right? We need to remember all these variables. And we need to remember them for all the channels. If we had to remember, if we had to work only with the current sample, for instance, in this case, we are doing an attenuation plugin, we only need to look at the current sample. Or if you are doing other things like a beat crusher, you only need to look at the current sample. That's an effect that just manipulates a single sample. Or if you had a very simple limiter that is just clipping stuff, you can do that just by looking at the current sample. And even things that you may not imagine, you can also just do with a single sample. Even things like a compressor, I think you can do just by looking at the current sample, as long as you remember the RMS of stuff that happened before. In any case, I won't get too much into this. My point here is, if you can do stuff just by looking at the current sample, then this setup is good enough. But if you need to remember things from the past, then this will not be enough. If we were writing the stereo effect by copying and pasting, we would rename variables to read xl n minus 1, xr n minus 1, yl n minus 2, yr n minus 2. But now we don't have that luxury because we are on a loop. And the problem is, how many of these variables are you going to need? If you have stereo, you need XL and XR. But if you are running 5.1, you need X, I guess, 1, X2, X3, X4, X5, X6. How many X's do you need? It depends on the number of channels.
Yeah.
Right? You don't know ahead of time. Well, you know it's the number of channels, but you don't know how many channels you have on your track. So it's the same problem we had with SPL0. The problem we had was, how many SPLs do we need? We don't know. Do we need just SPL0 and 1, or do we want to go up to 4, or do you want to go up to 35? I don't know. So we need a way to do the same thing we are doing with SPL, where we are indexing into, you can imagine there is this like list of samples coming in, and you are looking at a sample in this position. right? The index is that position. We'll have to do the same thing, but for our variables. And now you may be thinking, oh, is there some magical facility in ReaFIR that will do that for me? Maybe I can, instead of saying x and 2, maybe I can say x and 2 open parens and give it an index.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be great? It would be awesome, but it doesn't really exist.
I thought it definitely does.
So, yeah, so it doesn't really exist. So we have to create our own. That's the intent. What we want to do is, with our variables, the same thing that ReaFIR did with the sample stuff. That's our intent. It doesn't exist with ReaFIR, so we will create ourselves. ReaFIR at least gives you the basic blocks to build this thing that we want. Okay, so we are going to build this. That's what we are looking towards. In fact, why don't we have a fake objective with our simple plugin here, just to make sure that we are getting somewhere with something more realistic. Remember how we did a low pass filter in the first episode about EQs that was just the current sample plus the previous one divided by 2? It was just averaging the 2 most recent samples. So that's what we are going to build. We are going to build a very simple multi-channel low pass filter based on this simple concept of adding 2 samples and dividing by 2. And that is going to be enough to show the problem, because how many previous samples do you want to store? We can say that our previous sample is x n minus 1, but do we need xl and xr n minus 2, or do we want 7 of them, or do we want 15? So it's a very basic and small example of the bigger problem that we have, because the bigger problem is we need xn, yn, yn minus 2, and that gets boring, right? So we have a single thing that we need from the past. Okay, so it doesn't really exist. How do we build this? What is the basic block we have to play with? The basic block is a big buffer. And I will throw around some words that you may recognize and some words that you may not recognize. They all mean the same thing. I'm throwing all the words so that people will relate to different things depending on their background. This big thing can be a big buffer. It can be a big array. It can be a big list. It can be a big table. Same story, goes by different names. It's just a big space, a big region in memory. A big chunk of memory. Does this ring a bell?
Table,
some of these terms?
I've definitely heard, and buffer I've definitely heard, Yep.
So it's just a big scratch space. How big? About 8 million slots. We can store about 8 million numbers, which is good. I mean, if you think that you have 48,000 samples per second, if you have about 8 million slots, it means that even if you have many channels, you can still store like a good second or 2 worth of samples.
So with 64 samples, you still have more than 2 seconds. So that's pretty awesome. Yeah.
Which is not bad. It's not terrible. So, of course, the more channels you have, the fewer slots you have per channel, and then you will be able to store less time. Okay, so you have this big block. How do you use the big block? Well, ReaFIR gives you no guidance and it gives you no help. You have this big scratch space. You can do whatever you want with this scratch space, and ReaFIR will never give you an error saying, oh, you did something wrong. No. ReaFIR is going to give you the scissors and it's going to say, go ahead and run a marathon. I don't care. Yeah, that's what it is. Okay, so we have this big scratch space. How do we even use this? Well, it's going to be a piece of syntax that we looked at in the past. We talked about this, I think, last week. First, you need to say, I'll just give you a basic example. I'm going to dictate what you need to write. So say 0, open square bracket, 0, and you need to say square bracket, not parentheses. That's important. Yeah. And then close square brackets right after the second 0. And then that is how you access one piece of memory. That's crazy, right? What's going on? Select this whole thing and peek. You see that it has a value. The value will be 0 because everything in ReaFIR, in JSFX, they are all numbers. So all the slots, all the 8 million slots are all numbers. You cannot store text. You cannot store booleans. No, just numbers. And they all start with 0. Okay, so what's going on with this piece of syntax? Well, the first 0 is something that we call a base address. The second 0 is something that we call, I think that the index into the base address. I forget. I think that's what it's called. The index into the base address. That's what we are going to call it. So what ReaFIR does is it takes the 0 on the left, adds the 0 on the right, and that gives you a number. In this case, the number is 0. 0 plus 0. That is your index into the big chunk of memory with 8 million slots. What? Let's go over this again. So you give ReaFIR two numbers on the left and on the right. ReaFIR is going to add these two numbers together, and that's going to be the index into the big buffer of 8 million slots. Okay, what can you do with this? Well, we can read. That's what we just did. We read that slot. Slot number 0 has a value of 0. We can write to that slot. We can say exactly what you have on the screen. Right after the close bracket, you can say equals a number, your favorite number. What is your favorite number, Arya?
73.
All right, so now peek this whole thing, and the result will be 73 because when you assign, the result is whatever you assigned. And now you can peek at just, not the whole expression, peek at just 0, bracket 0, and that now has a value of 73. So we put some value in that slot and we read the value from the slot. Okay, let's look at different ways of doing this. What if we want to use not slot 0, but slot 5?
I would say...
How do you think you can use slot number 5?
I would say 0 bracket 5 equals 420, like this.
All right, peek at the whole thing, and then, well, peek at 0, 5, and what do you expect to see?
420. Oh.
It is 0. We have not assigned yet. You have not really run the code to assign 420 to that slot. So the slot starts empty. It starts with the number 0. Now you can peek the whole line, which we will assign to that slot. And then you can peek at 0, 5 again, and it will have that value in there.
So peeking also is like... So when you peek, does it run something? Okay.
Yes. A peek, you can imagine that peek is like if you have removed all the code that is not selected and saved.
Okay, cool.
And ReaFIR is just going to run and show you the result.
By the way, hi Bops NY, how you doing?
Hi Bops. So, okay, that's the story. We have a big chunk of memory with 8 million slots. We can store whatever number we want in there, but just numbers. And we can use this weird piece of syntax to get into that slot and read what's there, or to get into that slot and write whatever we want there. But why do we have this weird syntax of a number and then a bracket and then another number? Well, let's play around with these numbers. What happens if you say 2 bracket 3, for instance? What do you expect to happen?
It would say... I would expect it to say 5. No, I don't know. Oh.
Yeah, so let's think through this. As I said, ReaFIR is going to add the values on the left and on the right. So 2 plus 3 is 5. And what did we just store in slot 5? 420. We did that a minute ago. We used the previous line to store 420 in there, and it's still there. As long as the plugin is running, that value will be there. So ReaFIR is adding the numbers on the left and on the right. It's adding 2 and 3 to find the index into our big chunk of memory. In fact, 0, 5, 2, 3, 4, 1, they are all equivalent. They are all the same space in memory. ReaFIR is going to add the numbers to find the index into the big chunk of memory. Interesting, right? Huh? That's
and
weird.
This works like both ways. So if I also, instead of defining 0, 5 as 420, defined 1, 4 as 420, then I peaked at 0, 5, same results.
Go ahead, try it out.
Dupe, and we give it a thing. And then if I go make this 0, 5, peek at this boy, yeah.
There you go. So it doesn't matter how you have these numbers. If they add up to the same value, they are the same position in our big buffer. Okay, so we have a big array, a big buffer, and we need to be organized about this. Remember how I said that ReaFIR will not give us any guidance or help whatsoever? If we say that slots 0 and 1 are the previous samples for channel 1, for instance, that's something we can say, right? We can say that slots 0 and 1 are the previous, are xn-1 and xn-2 for channel 1. We can do that, right? Well, if we look at the slots, we'll have the samples in there. That's great. We can assign to that slot, and that's great. But if for whatever reason we go to that slot by accident and look at it, if we do the computation wrong, if we add up these numbers the wrong way, and we end up in that slot, ReaFIR will not tell us, oh, you think that this number is, I don't know, Y for channel 5, but it's actually the X for channel 1. Guy, you need to rethink your code. You're doing things wrong. No, ReaFIR will not do that. If you tell ReaFIR to go to that slot, ReaFIR will go to that slot. And if you interpret the value of that slot the wrong way in your code, it's your own fault. Go ahead. The scissors are yours. Go ahead and run the marathon. Okay? So we need to be really careful about how we use these slots. And if you look at different effects, you see that people have different strategies on how to reason about these slots, because you want to make sure that you are not going to code the wrong thing. A common error for you to run into, by the way, has a special name. Have you ever read the term or heard the term Stack Overflow?
I've heard it. I don't know what it is, though. Yeah.
Yeah, it is related to. It's not exactly the same as the thing I'm going to talk about, but it's a good analogy. So a Stack Overflow is when you have a chunk of the buffer. You say a buffer has 8 million slots. You only care about the first 2 slots. That's your maybe channel 1, 2 previous samples. And then channel 2 previous samples is just right next to that. It's slots 3 and 4. It's slots 4 and 5. It's slots
Leandro,
5 and 6.
sorry, hold on. I gotta do something. My cat's getting somewhere he shouldn't. 1 sec.
Okay. So, hey, Bo and Bobs, you all in the chat, is this explanation make sense? Do you follow? Does that resonate with you? Do you know these terms like buffers and arrays and tables and there are more names for this that I forget. But have you worked with buffers like this before? You may have used things like this in languages like C and C++ that have very little protection in terms of address management. And in fact, in C and C++, it gives you about the same guarantees in terms of security. If you use an address the wrong way, this index into the memory is an address. If you use that address the wrong way, C doesn't help you much. It's going to use that stale value. Oh, that's interesting. Stack Overflow from a calculator. Of course, right? The stack on a calculator is rather small. And the Stack Overflow example is kind of a stretch. So, Arya.
Yes, sorry. My cat was trying to topple the fan, and I was worried.
Yeah, so I was explaining this common mistake of you have this big chunk of memory and you slice it, and then you give different interpretations to different parts. Like you say that this is the part that is my previous samples from channel 1, my previous samples from channel 2, and so on and so forth. But then in your code, you do something wrong and you go over. And then by going over, this is actually called a buffer overrun. It's called a buffer overrun. But in some other contexts, it can lead to a stack overflow because the stack becomes too big and then you try to interpret other parts of memory that are not a stack as a stack. That's usually because you have a recursive function that is not behaving correctly. But that's a tangent. In any case, you have to be really careful about how you use this big array of memory, because ReaFIR is not going to help you in how you interpret these slots. Okay? So different people will come up with different ways of doing this. And I have a preferred way of doing this that I think is reasonable, and it resembles the way that SPL is managed. Okay? So the way we are going to do this is these numbers on the left and on the right, this, for instance, 0 bracket 0, you don't have to have 0 bracket 0. You can have a variable there in either position, actually. The 0 bracket 0 can be A bracket B if A and B are variables. In fact, because we did not define A and B, in ReaFIR, in JSFX, all the variables that you don't define have an initial value of 0. So this line reads exactly the same as the one we had before with 0, 0 hard-coded. Can you go ahead and peek at the AB stuff? And what value do we expect to come out? 73. Because that's what we had in slot 0. And A and B are variables that we do not define, so they start with a value of 0. And one unfortunate thing about this big buffer is that we have no way of looking at the values in there using the right pane. We can look at the variable values. So A and B are variables, and we can look at their values. But we cannot look at the big array and see all the 8 million slots. That's just, it's not there. We don't have access to that. We can always say a debug variable equals a certain slot, and then it will show up on the right pane because it's a variable. But if you have that in a loop, then it doesn't really work. Which iteration of the loop are you in, right? So in other words, to debug these variables is slightly more complicated. You have to come up with these tricks. But okay, so now we have this big chunk. How are we going to organize this? I think that the best way to organize this is we know how many samples we need to store. We need to store, in our example, 1 previous sample. And in the big effect, we need to store 2 previous samples, right? So because we only have to store 1 previous sample in our case, let's start with this case, which is simpler. How about we say that slot 0 is the previous sample from channel 0. Slot 1 is the previous sample from channel 1, and so on and so forth.
Okay.
Do you think that makes sense? Okay, so let's start with that. So I guess you can erase all this sample code that we wrote from the A-B stuff downward and go back into your loop, and on the line that right after the line that reads current channel index plus equals 1, and we are going to write some code in there. So how do we access the first slot, and then the second slot, and then the third slot in this loop? Do you have an idea?
For loops, but we don't have for loops.
We already have a loop.
No, I don't know.
Yeah, so the way you can do this is just say 0, open square bracket, current channel index, close bracket. What's happening there?
So it'll be 0 of 0 the first time, then 0 of 1, up to 63, depending on number of channels.
Yes. So that's how we can access that big array, and we are organizing it so that the first slot is going to be our previous sample. So how do we do this? Well, I guess we say equals. So now what we are going to do is to store that sample in there. So you just say SPL of current channel index.
Oh, gotcha.
So now we are storing the sample into that slot. And you need to put the semicolon there.
So quick question. So this first 0, because I was confused about it, that's kind of like a multiplier. So if I want to access like the 1,000,000th to 1,000,000th and 63rd value on the table, then that's what that is for, right? Okay.
Exactly. So it's not really a multiplier. It is the base address. It's not being multiplied by anything. It's just an addition. You just add the 0 to the number on the right. Right? So the intent here is, if we have a bunch of previous samples, and then we have, we need to store the RMS of something, and then we need to store the Y position of something on the user interface, and then we need to store something and something and something and something, right? That's a common situation where we have to slice this big chunk of memory in a way that makes sense. So the way you can do that is by slicing, use this variable on the left, which right now is just the number 0. But we could have a variable for that, and I think we should. So in the beginning, before we start the loop, you can say something like previous samples equals 0. That's your base address. Go ahead and do that. Before the loop, say previous samples, plural, because it's a list or an array.
What the hell did I just do? Samples equals 0.
Yeah, and then in the line that starts 0 open bracket, replace that 0 with previous samples. Now, of course, we know that the previous samples variable, it starts with 0 and it is always 0. We never change that value. So what's the point? Well, the point is to communicate. Oh, this previous sample is my base address. It's the place in the big chunk of memory where my previous samples start. I store my previous samples there. If I want to have another place in memory where I store other stuff, maybe I'm storing like the RMS of something. You can have RMSs is equal to 1,000,000. So in the 1,000,000th position of the big array, I'm starting to store my RMSs.
So the issue of stack overrun is, for example, if I start storing my RMSs, I go like RMS storage equals 50, and then for my channels between 50 and 63, there's like a value being written there, there's another value being written there, and they're not playing nice with each other. Cool.
You got this. So we need to be aware of the size of our stuff, we want to store. So we know that the previous samples, how many of them do we have? We have num_chen. We have the number of channels. So if we want to store something else, we better pick a value, we better pick a base address that is equal to or bigger than number of channels. So we don't overlap.
The maximum possible of number of channels, even. Like not even the current one.
Not really. You can get away with just having num_chen if you care. I mean, it doesn't really matter. I don't think that saving memory in this context is super necessary. I think that ReaFIR will do a good job of cleaning up memory that they don't use. But it's a good practice to only use the amount of memory that you need. Otherwise, you may end up with fragmentation issues. Remember how back in the day you had to defragment some stuff like your disk?
No, but yeah. I don't remember.
No idea? Really?
Yeah. And I've been a computer user for a long time, and because I'm Iranian, my first computer like ran on MS-DOS, but no, I do not remember.
Yeah, back in the MS-DOS days, you had like this super crazy storage mechanisms like hard drives that would have like 64 kilobytes of data, which is like mind-blowing. How much data can I store? 64K? Oh my God. Think of all the pixels I can store this. It's almost an image. So and then some parts, so you have your 64K, and then some of it is used, and then there is some blank space, and then some of it is used, and then there's some blank space, and then you want to defragment, you want to compact all these things so that they use the beginning of the disk, and you have all that space left for you to use at the end. And then Windows have this routine to defragment the disk, and you had to run, or DOS had that routine as well, and you had to run that from time to time to recover some of the space in your disk.
Yeah, I don't recall.
So it is a good practice to try to use the memory from the beginning up to some point, but try to be as efficient as possible in that storage. And we know we only need num_chen. We don't need 64. We could just reserve 64 if we expected that we would change the number of channels in the middle of the execution so that we wouldn't need to relocate other chunks of memory and move things around. But we don't change the number of channels in the execution of the plugin. If we change the number of channels, the plugin is reset. It's equivalent to a full recompile reset. So everything is zeroed out. But there are other contexts in which you allocate more things than you need. For instance, if you have a delay, you may want to allocate more than you need because the user may automate the delay size. And then in that case, you will end up using that memory. So you better just allocate it ahead of time. Memory allocation is a full story. It is complicated. There are millions of ways of doing this right, and there are millions of ways of doing this wrong. I'm just trying to show the simplest way that can work. So yeah, what we can have is all these variables like previous samples equals 0, RMSs equals num_chen, right? And then some other variable, maybe num_chen times 2, because you're storing num_chen previous samples and then num_chen RMSs, and then some more, and some more. And they don't even have to have the same size. You may have 64 previous samples and only 3 RMSs for whatever reason.
Cool. Bo says, I'd love to do a live coding session with you, Leandro, someday. You know, Bo, I actually thought of having you on the thing, and then I was like, well, if Bo's here, who's watching the stream? But maybe one day, or not one day. Yeah, you want to be on here next week? What do you think, Leandro? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. The more the merrier.
Every 3 of us.
I'm happy to have you. Yes. And yeah, let's catch back here on the chat. I've seen a raise when I messed up with AppleSoft as well. I'm not sure I know what AppleSoft is, Bobs. What's that? And yeah, Bo, let's do this live coding. Yes. And Bob says, I assume to keep the base designation in a linear fashion. For example, a 0 of 1 all the way to 64 of x. I'm not sure I understand that.
Keep the base designation in a linear fashion. Oh.
Yeah, I'm not
Maybe
sure
the
I
way
understand.
Bobs is conceptualizing it is that the number on the left outside the square bracket is the channel, and then the inside number is which sample ago.
That is also reasonable. We can, in fact, anywhere in any piece of code ever, if you see a variable like previous samples, open brackets, whatever in there, another variable, close brackets, you can always reverse. You can always say it the other way around. You can say current channel index, open brackets, previous samples, close bracket. It is exactly the same because ReaFIR is going to add these two numbers together, and previous channels plus current channel index is always equal to current channel index plus previous samples. That is just the associative property of addition.
Yeah.
Okay, but it is much more common to see things like the base address plus the index inside. So it's much more common to see previous samples at current channel index. We even read it out loud like that. We say previous channels at current channel index. Okay. So we are able to store the previous channel, the previous sample. And I think I said that I said it wrong. I said that you should have the previous samples stored on the line before SPL0 or SPL current channel index, but it needs to be on the line after, right? We need to store this for the next time we go around. Or yes, we need to store this for the next time we go around. So it needs to come after. And AppleSoft was a database programming language. Okay, interesting. I have never used it. But yeah, you can think of this, if you want to think about it as a database, you can think of this as a big database in which there is no notion of schema. You are not saying the types of anything. You are not saying the sizes of anything. You just have a big chunk and you have to figure everything out yourself. Okay. So now we want to use these previous samples, right? And we want to use it on the line before. We want to say previous samples at current channel index plus SPL of current channel index, which is the current sample, divided by 2.
Okay. So do I do it right here or do I do it in the line below?
You do it on the line above.
Oh.
Yeah, we are going to use that previous sample stuff.
Okay, so instead of this, I will have plus, let me know if I'm doing it right, current channel index minus 1?
No, use the previous samples array.
Oh, no, then I'm lost.
Yeah, say previous samples at current sample index.
Here?
No, right where you started typing. Okay. You have SPL of current channel index plus previous samples at current channel index. And then put parentheses around the whole addition and divide by 2.
Okay, let me just make sure that I understand the syntax. So, at the beginning, this is minus 1, this is 0. We come in. The first time that becomes 0, and that's so SPL0 equals SPL0 plus 0, 0, which is the value that is, well, that's not stored yet. So, at the beginning, first sample, nothing.
It is 0.
Divide by 2, go up, and now it's now it becomes 1, and then so SPL1 equals SPL0 plus 0, 1, which has a value stored in it, divided by 2. Okay, got it.
Yeah, so what we have there is a mind bender. It is just 5 lines of code, but the concepts in there are much more sophisticated than anything we had up to this point in the streams. We have a loop. We are using the big buffer, the memory, and we are using variables to index into that big buffer programmatically. We are also accessing the samples programmatically. That's all crazy stuff. But it is 5 lines of code. We will get through this. It will make sense. It just takes some time, because I have introduced many concepts from looping to the big buffer to even the DSP part of it, right? We are still doing an EQ here. And I think that this is working, and I think it is an honest to goodness multi-channel low pass filter.
Whoa, we got a little clip when we did the thing, but let's put this back here. Let's do this, and
here's something I want to see. Can you do a full compile reset and see if we clip again? We shouldn't clip.
Full recompile and reset done, and we didn't clip this time.
Yeah, so it was whatever trash was in there. Remember how we put 420 in there? That clips. It should be a number between -1 and 1. When you have 420, that's a loud noise.
And yeah, we can see that we have a low pass filter, and it is stereo. And I should have somewhere lying around like a quad file to bring in. Do you want me to do that?
If you want to keep it simple, you can always use my white noise generator. You are using the one that comes with ReaFIR, but if you use, I'm not sure about that one. It may be stereo only. You know what? Let's peek at this. Click on edit. Let's see if this is stereo or if it's multi-channel.
This thing. It is.
Yeah. We can quickly tell if it is
stereo.
It is stereo. You see? Yeah, it's copy and pasting code. It's stereo, but you can use mine. Mine is multi-channel.
By the way, Leandro, let me quickly. This is a huge tangent, Jesus. But I get an error when I synchronize my packages from your library.
Yes, my repository has changed address because it was created back in the day when Git used this nomenclature that is going out of fashion. It called there's this thing in Git where you can have multiple timelines. These timelines are called branches, and the default timeline, the default branch, was called master. But because master can relate to things like slavery, they are changing the name, so it's now no longer master, it's main. No. So you have to update. Sorry, there is no way for me to make that work. You really, everyone who has installed my stuff has to go in there and rename. Sorry, yeah, it's just the nature of the game.
Actually, mine was main, and I kind of broke my index, and then I was just kind of looking at everybody else's stuff on GitHub, and I saw that everybody's branch is master, so I made a master branch, and now these branches are breaking my mind. Anyway, we'll talk about all that stuff later. Cool.
Yeah. But don't rename stuff to master. Main is the name to use these days.
Yeah, I need to go and really do a lot of stuff then to my Git. Bob's.
Yeah, it's just one of those things that I really wished there was a way for me to make this backwards compatible. Well, I guess there could be. I could have a master branch just laying around and then have some version of plugin that would uninstall everything and give you an error message. Maybe I should have done that. But I think that ship has sailed. I'm just going to leave people with their broken stuff, and they're going to see, maybe if I uninstall this and reinstall it will work, and it will. So
Bob says that's because you're young. I guess that's in reference to me not remembering defragmenting memory. I remember when I was a kid and we had an MS-DOS. It was just funny. Like, I remember if I needed to play Prince of Persia, I needed to wait till my mom gets home. Because it wasn't like you click on Prince of Persia and open the game. My mom had to like write some stuff in there, which I think was just the path of where the executable file was or whatever. but I couldn't actually open my game myself. My mom had to come and type the thing into MS-DOS and then be like, okay, there you go. And I would play Prince of Persia.
And the funniest thing is that Windows itself was just like that. You had to boot into DOS, and then you had to say, open Windows.
I remember that. I remembered, like, then later I kind of learned at least how to open Windows, and then I could. Fun times.
Yeah. And Bob's is saying that he thinks it was SPL 0 equals SPL 1 equals SPL 0 plus 1 times a half. I don't think it was, because that would not, think about it, what would that do? It will not add the current sample with the previous one. It would add the left channel to the right one and divide by 2. So in effect, it would take a stereo signal and make it mono.
I think that's what he's intending, because it says I made a monoizer plugin. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
That's cool. And then...
Oh yeah, okay, now I read it. Yeah, the previous line is related to that. Yeah, the monoizer plugin is exactly that. It's you don't have to write that, Bo, because I have a plugin that I wrote in one of my old videos that is not only a monoizer for stereo, it is a Swiss Army knife of these kinds of manipulations. So you can take a multi-channel signal, 5.1 for instance, and you can make it mono. Or you can take 5.1 and make some of the channels go to the left and some of the channels go to the right and make it stereo, which is kind of fun stuff. And it's very simple, just like the line you wrote, except that you have some loops in there.
Cool.
Yeah. Okay. So we have all the structure in place to do this multi-channel stuff, and this worked, right? We tested, and it is doing multi-channel.
Yeah, we were gonna grab your multi-channel white noise generator, which we did, and we were gonna test to see if it is indeed gonna do it to all 4 channels. I guess now we also need something to show us 4 channels of audio, because this just shows us the whole summed audio, right?
I'm not sure what the frequency spectrum analyzer does, but I think it shows you different things in different colors, different channels in different colors.
I've never seen different colors.
I maybe misremembering.
But hey, we got that
but
other
yeah,
thing.
I don't think that your track is...
Sorry?
I think that your track is stereo.
I just made it 4 channel. Maybe the spectrum analyzer is only stereo. Yeah, so this has 4 channels now.
And our effect.
And
our effect, is it quadraphonic? Yes. All right.
Oh, wait.
It seems like the spectrum analyzer is not capable of
the other thing does, though. The other one that we were using for do you remember what I'm talking about? The oscilloscope was had I think different colors for different channels. Shablamps. Yeah. And if we... How did we... Oh, it changed the length.
And this only has 2 inputs.
Oh, so I guess the issue is that we can't verify that we indeed have...
I think you can use my oscilloscope. I think my oscilloscope is multi-channel.
Oh yeah, I was watching your video of you making this.
This is an oscillator, not an oscilloscope.
Oscilloscope. Sorry. Yep. Oh yeah, you made the background white for a reason that I don't remember. Because it's white noise, it's hard to see the different colors. I can kind of...
Yeah, you can zoom in horizontally.
There we go.
And you see all the 4 lines in there.
So if we...
See? I always do my stuff multi-channel if I
Yeah,
can.
and we can see that the plugin is indeed doing something to all 4 channels. So, confirmed.
Yeah, we cannot really tell just by looking at the oscilloscope. It's hard to tell if we did a low-pass filter,
Yeah.
but I think we did because that's the formula for a low-pass filter.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so we know how to use the big buffer. Do you want to go over that weird line that starts with SPL open parens again? Do you want to reason about it again?
No, I think I got it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then prove it.
Okay.
Explain the line.
So from the top, you at the beginning it's -1. This is 0. You get into the loop. This becomes 0, and SPL0 equals SPL0, whatever value that is, plus this will be 0 because this is 0 and this is 0, so that will be 0. And then whatever SPL0 is divided by 2, that'll be this value, which is stored right here. So SPL0 is stored right here because this value is this value. Then we go around. This remains 0, previous sample. This becomes 1. So now SPL1 equals SPL1 plus this will be SPL0. So SPL1 plus SPL0 divided by 2, which is now stored right here under 0, 1. So this will be 0, this will be 1 now. And that'll store whatever this value is. And then we keep going in the loop, right?
And so on and so forth. Okay, couple of things that we need to fix. First is that actually there is a mistake in the code.
Okay.
Can you spot the mistake?
Let me. By the way, hello Fotis and stuff. I see. It's funny. I see you guys also on the Air Windows. Chris's stuff. So that's funny. We're a very small community. Okay. Error in the thing. I'm thinking the error in the thing is that we don't have like at the beginning, we are just kind of adding this. So this is the same thing. This thing that we're doing is SPL current channel index. So we're just constantly adding the current channel index with itself.
Yeah, so the error is related to that. Yes, we are changing SPL current channel index. That's what we're doing. We are changing that. And we are storing that on the line after that. So we are storing the already modified thing. And that's not what we want. We want to store the original sample. But we don't want to do that in the previous line. We don't want to reverse the lines because we want previous samples to be the previous sample when we are doing the formula, when we are adding to the current sample and dividing by 2. Right? So what we need is to have another variable. We need to say something like sample equals, and then the formula. And then later we'll have SPL current channel index equals sample.
Okay. So first I define a sample.
No, you can just start the variable right there. So in that line, you can replace this. Yes, replace the whole thing. Replace even SPL parentheses. Replace that with sample. Or another name, whatever name you want to give it.
Sample is...
Or output.
Yeah, output sample equals this.
And then, there you go. And then on the last line, we can say SPL0 SPL current channel index equals output sample.
Okay.
So that will be the last line. No, a new line after everything.
Okay. SPL equals... See, this time it didn't suggest. And in like this. And I forgot
Yes.
the ship layups.
There you go. Yeah, so the problem was that we were changing SPL 0 before, or SPL current channel index. We were changing the sample before we had a chance to store the sample. So now we are using that temporary variable that we called output sample to store that value. Then we change, then we store the current sample for the next time we are going to go around, and then we change the output. Okay, so that was one thing. And when you were explaining, maybe you just misspoke, but when you were explaining, you were saying that the previous samples would be, for instance, when we are going around the loop and current channel index is the number 1, you would be adding SPLs of 1 plus previous samples of 0. But no, you are going to previous samples of 1.
Oh.
Because you are going to, when you have SPL of 1, you are going to ReaFIR and you're asking what is the current sample. And when you are saying previous sample of 1, you are going to that big block and you're saying, what did I store here before?
Oh, okay. No, I did not misspeak. I totally misunderstood that. And yeah, now that I think about it, it makes sense. We don't want to like add the previous sample from one channel to another. Yeah.
Yes, we don't want to mix channels in any way. So the monoizer stuff that Bo did is not what we are attempting. We only want to look at channels separately. In fact, you can think of this as an effect that is completely, it looks at each channel completely independently. There is no
crosstalk,
crossing between the channels. Yes, something like that. You can think of it like that. There are effects in which you have to think in stereo. For instance, for a compressor, when you're calculating RMS to do a compression, you have to think in stereo, because if your left speaker is super loud and your right speaker is super quiet, you don't want to compress each channel individually and end up with more or less the same volume in every speaker. No, you want to compress consistently, and then you will keep the dynamic range between these left and right speakers, but you will compress everything together. So some effects have to be aware of this, but an EQ, as far as I understand, does not have any of that. In an EQ, you EQ each channel independently. Is that right?
Well, like you have both ways. But yeah, like if you do, back in the Pro Tools days, you have like multi-channel EQs and you have multi-mono EQs, but they don't really, they do the same thing. So if you like have a preset and you save it and you do multi-channel and then you A/B it or null test it with a multi-mono, it'll be the same unless it's MS. Because with MS, you needed multi-channel. You can't have multi-mono MS because you need both channels and you do some difference. Yeah. So yeah, I think with regular EQs, yeah, you're pretty much, and I guess with the way we have it set up, where we kind of process each channel independently, if we wanted to, we could then give the user like an option, like this is the EQ curve for the left channel, different EQ curve for the right channel, or for whichever channel.
You could do that,
cool.
Yes. Yes. The problem in doing that in practice is that you probably don't have enough sliders to do 64 channels, because ReaFIR has 64 channels can have up to 64 channels on a track, but it has a limit of 64 sliders. So you only get one slider per channel.
Yeah.
And then if you want to have an EQ with a filter type and a cutoff frequency and a dB gain and whatnot, you won't, either you have to support fewer channels or you won't be able to have as many options per channel. And yeah. And that's something that actually comes up. If you follow the forum about ReEQ, not ReaEQ, but ReEQ by Justin, not the same Justin that created ReaFIR, a different Justin. So he has that problem. He has an EQ that has so many parameters that 64 sliders is not enough. It has been a while. We have been asking for more sliders, but that's not something that has happened yet.
Cool.
Yeah. And why do we want to have sliders? I mean, ReaEQ is a full graphical user interface. It doesn't show sliders if you don't want to see sliders. But to be able to automate stuff, you have to have an actual slider. You may hide it from the user interface. We learned how to do that. In the slider definition, you can just start the name with a minus sign. It's going to be hidden, but it's still available for automation. It's still available for controls in the track control panel. If you have something that is not a slider, you can have a variable that is not a slider and you can control the variable from the graphical user interface, but you won't be able to automate that.
Fotis is asking something that we just talked about Leandro's ReaFIR pack. So Leandro, if I basically just come here, this whole thing, instead of master, I say main, that's it. It'll be fixed, right?
Yes. I don't think you can rename. Can you
can't
rename
really
the
rename.
path?
You can just
that?
delete and make it again.
Oh, I'll do you one better. I think you can just import the new repository and ReaPack will say, oh, I see another repository here with that name. Do you want to replace?
Cool. Yeah, so Fotis, that's the... Yeah,
can you
I'm
do
going
that?
to do that right now. Just because I was bound to do it at some point. So Fotis, this will fix your thing. Who writes the www? I'm going to your thing the MS-DOS way. All right. And I go ReaFIR. And so now it's this boy. I can't believe mine was...
Oh, so Fotis...
Sorry, go on.
Fotis is saying that changing to main didn't work. Well, that is weird.
What I'm going to do, I think, is... Don't give me that sound. Oh, it's because this is here. Let's see. Maybe instead of doing that, I'll just delete what's in here.
No, but then it will delete all the files and re-download all the files. That's just annoying.
So you're saying do this. Is already configured with a different URL. You want to overwrite it? Yes.
See, it didn't... Well, install the new thing that is just something that I developed after your last synchronization, but it changed in place and it worked.
And
you can synchronize packages and it will not complain now. Yeah, Fotis, maybe retry or maybe delete the repository and import it again. But I'm sure it's there, it's working. We just proved it. So if you cannot get it to work, let me know and we can figure it out. But you cannot use ReaFIR without my scripts. Come on.
Yeah. And I've been so lazy to implement your video thing, and it bit me in the ass the other day. I did a big JSFX, like a ReaScript tutorial, and I realized that my camera was like blocking a very important part of the damn thing. So that bit me in the ass. I should have set your thing up where it brings all the layers in.
Yeah, since we are taking a tangent, can I ask you a ReaFIR thing that my wife ran into? I got my wife into ReaFIR. She's working on a video project, and I showed her how to edit video on ReaFIR. And there is one thing she wants to do that I never had to do, and I don't know how to do. She has this big thing that she edited, and she wants to change the order of some things. So effectively, she wants to make a time selection and move a time selection. She wants to move not only the items, but also the markers and everything along with it. So can you move a time selection? How do you do that? I thought about maybe...
make a region and move that.
I was going to say, I thought about maybe creating a region. Yeah, Fotis, you can always email me with some screenshots if you're still having trouble. Yeah, and try to explain everything that you are doing the best you can. Yeah, okay, so creating a region and moving it around. Is that the best answer?
Yeah, I was wondering if it'll move the markers. Why are you misbehaving right now? Yeah, it'll move the markers. It'll move everything with it. Let me see if there's anything that may go wrong if you do that. Okay, so yeah, so what I would do, because if we, so check out this marker and this tempo marker that we got right here. If I move this here, no, that'll remain the same. I thought maybe it may do something there, but still I think to be safe, the best way would be, this is the region you want to move. This is where you want to move it to, so make another region there. And then just move like region 1 before region 2.
Yeah, that kind of works, and I thought about doing it that way. We don't really care about things like tempo markers. It's a video project. It's not a music video. So I thought about using regions, but first of all, it's not ergonomic. You have to create a region. You have to move it around. You have to create another region so things don't overlap the wrong way, blah, blah, blah. But I just wanted to be able to click and to drag things around, you know? It's like what you can do with text in most programs. You can just select some text and click and drag it around, you know what I mean?
One thing that I've noticed, and I found out about it really accidentally, is that if you're in Ripple all mode, instead of creating a region, you can create an empty item and have it do the same thing. It'll move your markers around. It'll move all the markers that overlap that item around. And so
sort of, but it doesn't really work, because if you want to go back, it will not create space the same way that moving a region creates a space.
Let's see. Yeah, so once I cut these and I paste it here, it eats up the markers. Yeah.
There is no good answer for this, is there?
If you don't create a region... Yeah, if you don't create a region... Oh, wait, there is something. Where would this be? That would be... ruler, possibly? Edit loop point and time, move loop point and time selection. I think there's move loop points and time selection with the contents. No. Yeah, only in region, only in project region, you have like move contents of project region together. Yeah. So you just got to make a region.
Yeah, that's kind of annoying when you are like moving clips around to do a video edit. That can be super annoying. So she asked the words that I always wanted to hear. She asked, "Can you write a script for me?" And that's love. Yeah, so maybe we'll have to create a
I mean, if
script
you want to move items, that's pretty simple. It's the markers that complicate things, right?
But even moving markers, if you move a marker, moving items, if you want to move an item back, it's not going to create space.
Doesn't it? It does. Yeah, like I do this.
Not when you move, but when you copy and paste, it seems to move, or cut and paste.
But if I copy and paste, it won't move. Oh, if I do this. Oh, okay, yeah, you can't drag it. Let me see how we can MacGyver that. Can we MacGyver that? Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah, so you want to do plap. The old Pro Tools has a shuffle mode, where in shuffle mode, as you click and drag, you get it instantly. Like if I hold this and I drag it left, it'll instantly snap to this item. And if I keep dragging left, it would then insert a space and put that there. It kind of works like this with the tracks.
Yes. You know what I want? It has a name. The thing that I want, or that she wants, I don't really use that workflow. But the thing that she wants is a magnetic timeline from Final Cut Pro.
Yeah, that's shuffle mode in Pro Tools as well. Yes, there is not a thing like that in ReaFIR that I am aware of. And that would be really complex to script.
Yes.
Like that would be that would go to the level of scripting where like do we have access to that bit of the code even to make something like that happen? Hold up, actually. But this may also not work, or reorder adjacent items randomly. But that's random. Reverse order of selected items. Reverse order of selected items. So I think let's give all of these a color. So I want to move this. So I want to move the blue where this is. I can reverse order. But yeah, if they're not adjacent, it will still not create space. It'll just put their start times of where each one is.
And also, as I understand it, you wanted to move the blue before the green, but you didn't want to switch the relationship between green and orange. They should still be green and orange, not orange-green.
Yeah. Yes. So this won't work.
That's not what happened.
Razor edit. What about a razor edit? Wait.
That's kind of new. I don't know what that is.
Yeah. Boop. What did I assign to my razor edit? Yes. Okay. So razor. I got a razor edit. No, that just erased everything. Yeah. I'll try to get back to you on this. Like if there's a action that I find, though, that's the extent of what I can help with. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I also thought about how to write this. I don't think it's actually too hard. It probably is hard if you want to take into account everything that could happen, including things like tempo markers and whatnot, or stretch markers or whatnot. I don't even fully understand how envelopes work from a scripting level. But if you are just doing a basic cut, replace, or reorder stuff, we could just... I can think of two modes of operation. Either we would have a script in two parts where you would have to either start by... It doesn't even have to be in two parts. It can be a single script. You can have a time selection of the thing you want to move, and you can put your cursor where you want to move it to. And the script will just maybe create a region, cut the region, paste the region, and remove the region. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's really easy to do. Yeah, that's what I do in my... Now we're getting real tangenty. But that's what I do in my MIDI editing is like if I have like a little passage and I have another passage, and then... So if I want to just grab this bit and put it here, I have that. So yeah, it basically takes a selection, copies it, and remembers the time. And then when I hit Control and V, it'll go save selected or copy selected notes, and it pastes them here. So yeah, you can do something like that where basically I select this region, I put my thing here, I press the thing, and it goes Command X, Command V. But it's still not working with dragging. It will not work with dragging. It'll just work with pressing a hotkey.
Which is acceptable, but dragging would be better. And for dragging, I have a fancier idea. The fancier idea is a script that you leave running on the background. And as you move items, the script will notice, oh, these items are moving. Let me reshuffle them. And that would be crazy because on the script, we can, at any point, when the script is running, we can look at all the items in the timeline. We can see which ones moved, and we can see which ones are selected. We can tell, oh, this is the space that I need to create, and they can put all the other items after. So it's crazy stuff, but I think it would be super fun to create a magnetic timeline.
But here's the thing with that. So you will be able to detect that something is being dragged, but by default, you can't modify what the left drag does to an unlimited number of things. You know what I mean? So you have these actions where it changes the default mouse modifier to do something, but you can't make it do anything. You can just make it do the things that ReaFIR lets you.
Oh, but my script is going to be running on the background. Our script, because we're going to
Sure,
write this on
sounds
the
fun.
stream if we can. So it's an idea anyway. It goes into the big backlog of ideas that we have. But the idea is that the script is going to be running on the background, and it's not going to change what the mouse does. It is just going to fix things as you move. So the mouse moves stuff, that's all right. You're going to move stuff, and then my script is going to say, oh, this moved. I need to reshuffle things to make the magnetic thing work. So we won't change the meaning of left click and drag, but we are going to be listening for changes. The same way in Spirit, it's the same thing that happens with action markers or marker actions, I never remember. They are implemented in C. We looked at that in the past, but you could implement that in Lua. You just have to know where the cursor is, and you have to keep your script running in the background. And when the cursor moves over a marker, you have to trigger the action. So we will do something similar. It's not related to playing, it's related to moving, but the spirit is the same. We want to create a magnetic timeline.
Bob says razor cuts. Well, I guess we don't want to cut. Otherwise, if we were okay with cutting, we can already just without razor do that. And we also, cool, Fotis fixed your LeoFac problem. That's great. There is a way to do it.
I'm sorry about the big files. In fact, I was contacted by a person who was living in a rural area in Africa, and the connection was super slow, and the person couldn't download all my stuff. And I'm like, okay, I usually don't care too much about file sizes, but I am making people download 100 megs for stuff that they may not even use. So yeah, maybe I would change something about that in the future.
Maybe your FFmpeg stuff can be like another index, like a separate repository. Yeah.
Maybe. Or I don't know. I can have some other solution where I download FFmpeg the first time you run the script, and I can show you a downloading screen. Like, hang in there.
Bo says DaVinci. I personally stopped using DaVinci because ReaFIR just is like way faster. My RAM is not good enough to my RAM is. I think DaVinci asks for 16 minimum, or it may ask for 8 minimum for RAM, and I have 8. And it's just too slow for me. It's a deal breaker. ReaFIR is like pow, pow. And I've started doing animations in ReaFIR, which is dumb as hell. Because I make PNGs in GIMP, and I import them in ReaFIR, and then I use automation to move them around. It's like beyond stupid, but it's still better than DaVinci because it's like slow.
Yeah, and how do you do the text? In your videos, you have text that it is like writing.
Well, two types. One thing I have is this. So I create any empty item where I want there to be text, and I go right-click, insert text, which puts a video processor, and it's on the text. And then you can just change this to whatever and save, and it'll be here, and then you can move it X and Y around and stuff like that.
Yeah, that much I know. In fact, I created stuff that kind of use this, and some of things that are even better than this, I think. But the problem is, how do you did you use a video processor that types in the text over time?
Oh, you mean when something kind of like comes in and it goes like the script
letter by letter?
No, it's much dumber. It's much dumber than it seems. I would do this. I would go W. Yeah, this is what I do. Straight up.
Really?
That is straight up what I do. And then I copy this over, and in this one I say WH.
Oh my God, that is a lot of work.
And again, since we're in tangent land, what I would love, and I think we can do this together, is a teleprompter JSFX.
Oh yeah, for sure. That's
right?
super easy. writing text in a video processor is super easy, and moving text around is super easy, and having letters come in one at a time is super easy. I was asking because I didn't know if such an effect existed and if you have developed
There
one.
is one thing.
But since that doesn't exist,
thing you can do. You can use let me put this here. You can use a second thingamajig. Oh, sorry. Yeah. You can have a second one of these to do a wipe. And the wipes, in my opinion, are named incorrectly because the horizontal wipe does a vertical wipe. And then you automate this. So you go whatever. You see on the screen. Oh, people don't see this actually. I'm dumb. My camera is in front of it. Let me put the video right here. Whoopsie daisies. I'll even put it right here. I'll even do this. So with the wipe position, I can write the whole text and then automate this.
Which is not the same, right? Because your letters show one at a time. They don't wipe.
What do you mean?
It's not the same.
Yeah, it goes like full W.
In a given frame, you may see half of a letter using a wipe.
So not great. I do it the hard way, man.
No, Arya, please don't do that anymore. Let's write a script that, given a piece of text, will do the effects for you.
I have about 1,000 things I would love to do with video processors, which I'm sure is possible. And I'm sure that you can do it in half a second and make my life so much easier. Another thing I've started doing, which is slightly easier, is making GIFs in GIMP and then importing them into ReaFIR via resources. That makes it slightly easier because it just like will do the thing. No, very ghetto.
Oh my God, that is a lot of work. Okay. Enough with the tangents, I think. Let's catch up with chat, and then I can assign you some homework, and we can wrap it up. How about that? Okay, so yeah, the reason why I did not tell my wife to use DaVinci, and the reason why I don't use DaVinci myself, is partly because of what Arya said, but partly because I just think that the workflow in ReaFIR works better in most cases. For instance, this was not the case in that project that my wife is working on right now, but it's the case when I edit podcasts. I need to be able to remove the silence automatically. I don't want to remove silence by hand. And as far as I can tell, it's impossible to do in DaVinci. It's sort of possible to do in Audition, but it's a huge hack. You have to create a single file not a single file, but a single track with multi-channel, and then you have to use some truncate silence that way, or you have to use Audacity and you use destructive operations to do that. It's just a mess. In ReaFIR, I can do that with my script. So lots of advantages to using ReaFIR, even for video. If you have a long video podcast or a long vlog and you just want to cut out the silences, you can do that. So that's why I think ReaFIR is superior to DaVinci, because of these things that I need to do, like removing silence, auto mixing, and that sort of thing.
So, couple more things in the chat to address. Fortisensa says, have you tried it? I think you mean DaVinci. And yes, I tried it. I learned it. I was liking it. And then it was just way too slow for me. Like, usually when I make my rapid fire ReaFIR tutorials, I do it in like a space of like 3 or 4 hours. So with DaVinci, it was just way too slow. It was pissing me off. Yes, ReaFIR blog is here, and ReaFIR blog, ReaFIR blog John has the best tech stuff. John, your thing with using the item name to instead of typing into each video processor, does that work like this? Item name, and then that's it?
No, you have to use a different way of getting a hold of the text. What you have right now is a piece of text that reads hash item name.
Yeah, because it's a string.
No, but there is a function. There is a function that comes with ReaFIR for video processors only. Doesn't work with JSFX. it's the same language, but it's not the same environment. So it's still EEL2, but it's not the same exactly. So there are these differences. And there is a function that you can get a name of the current item. I do that as well in some of my stuff. I have some video processors. I don't remember why I had that. Oh, I have that for a crazy thing. I have multicam editing in ReaFIR. So the way multicam works is it looks at the item name to know which camera it should be showing. It's a crazy thing. I have a video about that.
Okay, I'll look at your video, cause yeah, that would be lovely. I saw your tutorial on that, John, and I just, I'm ADHD, so I did not think about implementing it until this moment, because probably after I watched your video, I was like, oh, I should implement this. And then I opened ReaFIR and some thought came into my mind, and this is like 6 months later. It's blank in the text part, then do take name and item properties. It's blank in the text part, so... Oh, this is blank. No, this is blank, I guess.
Yeah, and then you call that function. You don't put the quotes there.
Oh, okay. You don't put the quotes there, and you go, then do take name and...
Yeah, you call a function instead. You call a function instead. It's get, take name, item property, yada, yada, yada. I don't really know the name of the function.
Take name, item... None of these are suggesting.
I can look it up, but I don't remember the name of the function.
Yeah.
I can always look it up.
Please look for a shortcut in GitHub.
Yeah, and that's another... Yeah, why can't you send links on the chat? That's weird. But yeah, Shortcut is a good editor as well, but it doesn't have all these things that I like the ability of removing silence automatically and whatnot. Aria, can you hit F1 in that window so we get to see the help for this?
Whoopsie daisy. I think John just
somewhere in there
gave us the answer. Why did that happen? Why did that happen? Oh, it's because I pressed F2 by accident. No, I'm pressing F1 and nothing is happening.
No, but you see the video processor reference, it opened.
Where did... Oh, there we go.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not shortcut, it's shotcut. Like you're cutting a shot of video. That's the name of the editor. It's super popular among people using Linux because it's free, open source, and because it comes with some Linux distributions like Ubuntu for media creation. Yeah, in there somewhere, you will find how to get a hold of the current item name. Anyway, we are way into tangent.
Yeah, John says that it is in the same video processor. So I don't see it. Am I just so dumb? Set to string to override. So we don't want to set the string to override. So pow.
That will not fly. That is not even correct syntax, I don't think. You have to give it a value.
Yeah.
And let me read that code for a moment, and we can tell if there's something in there. Go back to the bottom of the code, and the line that is actually writing stuff on the screen is the last line. So it's getting a hold of the text, and there is nowhere else where it's trying to... Oh, there is. If there is a line that reads strcmp, which stands for string compare, and it's comparing the text to empty. If this comparison to empty is 0, in other words, if the text is empty, it's going to use input get name, which is the name of the function we were talking about, the name of the function that gets the item name. So if you don't change anything and you just change the name of the item, it will just work, Arya. It will just work.
I just don't touch anything, but do I need to put anything here?
Yeah, okay. No, just put quote, double quote, double quote. So it's an empty string. And as John is saying, stop breaking the script.
Okay.
It's already working. It's doing the thing.
There we go. Oh my God.
Just name
what
the
the
item.
fudge? There we go. Yes. Okay. So,
Yeah.
so if I change this to ReaFIR blog and did I still break something? Oh, do I need to save this? Yes. Okay. Cool. Would you look at this? Okay, awesome. I am
Yeah.
going to save this and call it text the proper
What are you
way.
doing? This is already a
Oh,
preset.
is it? Oh. Okay. I'm losing it.
Okay. Let's go back to the matter at hand here. We were talking about multi-channel, and we talked about the big buffer and how we want to slice the buffer. And we use the buffer in a naive way. We just looked at, we said that we want to store one previous sample in our EQ, in our simpler low-pass multi-channel EQ. We looked at one previous sample, but in our big EQ, we need to have more stuff. We want to have 2 previous samples, and we want to have 3 outputs. No, 2 outputs, right? Yeah. Yeah, we want 2 previous samples and 2 outputs. We want to store xn-1 and xn-2, and we want to store yn-1 and yn-2. Xn is the current sample, and yn is going to be the thing that we compute, right? Can you go ahead and show that part of the code? Because I'm just saying variable names here, and it gets too abstract.
Sure, that is in this one, which I think we also have right somewhere, right here. Yes, and right here.
Yep.
That'll be awesome, John. Thank you.
Xn is... yeah, thanks, John. That's very nice of you. I typically don't use the presets that come with ReaFIR, or I don't really use the presets that come with, that I found on the forum or anything. I usually write the code myself. It's for the kinds of things that I have to do. It's typically simpler. Like I wrote my own thing to do masking so I can have rounded corners, and then I wrote some things to do. Like I find it easier to write the code to put the text where I want. Sometimes I want a lower third. I can just divide the height of the thing by 3 and I know where it will sit. So I tend to write in like draw a string, and I just write what I need. In any case, but I would love to read your code and learn from it. That's for sure. So yeah, it would be lovely if you want to do that. All right, so xn is our input. It's sample 0. We don't have to store that in the big buffer. xn2 and xn1 we need to store in the big buffer, right? We need to remember that in the next pass. Yn we calculate. We don't need to store. Yn2 and yn1 we need to store for later. We need to have it around the next time we go around this sample block. So we need to store 4 things, not 1 thing, 4 things per channel.
Right.
Right? So there are many ways to organize this. I'm going to propose one way, and to implement, and your homework is either going to be to implement that way or to come up with your own way and do whatever you think it works best. But I think that the best way to organize this is to have 4 little blocks per channel. So we'll have a base address, and then you will have the index, the thing that goes in brackets. For instance, in the code that you have on the screen, the part that reads current channel index, it will be the channel times 4. So it will go from 0 to 4 to 8 to 12 and so on. And then in that block of 4 things, we can store xn-2, xn-1, yn-2, and yn-1. So we store the 4 things that we care about per channel. So our index will end up being, you may want to take note of this somewhere. So we'll have a base address, which will give it a name. We call it previous samples.
We'll
here,
just call it like what it was before, no? Yeah.
There you go.
Okay.
Yeah, you can do that.
So xn, we need 1 for xn minus 1. We need x1 minus 2. We need yn1. We need yn, whoopsie daisy, 2.
In fact, that's an even better idea, Arya. I think that your idea is even better. So let's organize it the other way around. Let's put my original idea upside down. Instead of having little chunks of 4 elements, how about we have a big chunk that is number of channels size. So if you have 15 tracks or 16 tracks, if you have 16 tracks, you can only have an even number of tracks in ReaFIR. If you have 16 tracks, xn1 will have 16 slots, xn2 will have the next 16 slots, yn1 will have the next 16 slots, and so on.
So this is what I would do. Like I would define these kind of before the loop.
Yes, you define this before the loop. Usually you define this in the init block or the slider block.
Cool. I will do that.
So let's actually write this part down because I want things to be doable for you. I want you to be able to accomplish this. So xn1 can be 0, right? That is the beginning of the big block of memory. So that's your base address. So that can be 0. And then xn2 is going to be number of channels. And then yn1 needs to be number of channels times 2. We need to make space for the things that came before. And then yn2 is number of channels times 3. The cool thing about this representation that you came up with is that if you look at xn1 at your current channel index, you get your xn from there. Do you see what I mean?
And so now this is my question. This was and then so in our real EQ, once we implement it, we also would need then per number of bands, like more of these, right? So right now we have 2 bands. So I would also go Zn is numch times 4 times 5, right? Okay.
Yes.
Sick.
There's still more to doing that change. You will also have to go to everywhere where you're using xn2 and you have to replace that with xn2 of current channel index, right? So you have to do that change and you have to write a loop around that block of code. So there's still some more work to do there, but I think that the path is laid out, right? I think you understand what you need to do there, right?
Let me tell you, so you make sure that I do understand. So in our current thing, we are doing all this stuff. We're grabbing a hold of this sample, then previous, then the one before previous, and then we're plugging them into this thing, and what comes out will plug into this thing, and what comes out will plug out of that. What I need to do is now have a loop that calculates all this stuff per channel, and then what comes out of that loop will go into here, will go into the function of the filter.
Not really. You want to wrap this whole block with a loop. Because we said that we were going to do a multi-mono stuff, right? Multi-mono EQ. So you want to do a loop around the whole block. And let's just start copy and pasting stuff. Most of this will probably work. You can probably copy and paste this xn1 equals 0, xn1 number of channels, that stuff. You can copy that above.
Which this isn't, by the way, even our main script. So, but okay. And we need...
Yeah, whatever. Put the semicolons.
Well, I guess that technically works if I put it at the beginning of the next line. Okay.
And then you have to do the setup with the current channel index equals -1, loop number of channels, blah, blah, blah.
Okay, and that goes... Does that all go... Well, I just wrote this extra thing. I'm just going to get rid of that. But these need to be defined before, right? No.
Let me see. So first of all, the current channel index equals -1 needs to occur before the loop. We need to set up that variable for the loop, right?
Yes. We just bring
So copy that
these
line.
two in.
Yeah, the previous samples equals 0, you don't need. That was the base address. We are not using that. But now we have the whole setup for the loop. Now the body of the loop you can remove. Everything from output sample onwards until the end of the loop, you can remove. And then you need to close the loop. So go to the last line of the script and put a close parenthesis semicolon to close the loop. Now, typically people will put the close parenthesis on the next line, and they will select the whole block and indent. So it's clearer that all of this is a single block. Excellent. Now, anywhere where you see xn2, you have to put in brackets current channel index, because now xn2 is not a variable, it's a base address into the memory that we want to look. And the same goes for all occurrences of xn1 and yn2 and yn1. And you can even create the z's above on the init block and do that for the z's as well. You don't have to do all of that. That's going to be your homework. But you have to use not SPL of 0, you have to use SPL of current channel index.
I don't do this, obviously, for xn, right? Xn is just SPL of current channel. Yeah, why does it sometimes suggest and why sometimes doesn't suggest is beyond me.
I don't know. Most of my ReaFIR scripting has been done before the suggestion even existed. So I don't really have all the ins and outs of this.
Is this a new thing? Oh,
yes, it is new. Yes. I think it was ReaFIR 630 or something.
Oh, well, did I pick the right time to learn this stuff then? And I'll let you go in a second, I promise. But now I go numch. Yeah, times 4 and then times 5. Tell me if what I'm thinking is stupid. Yes, it is. As soon as the thought manifested, I realized that it's very stupid. Okay. And then Shabloinks. Cool. So now that's it, right? Now it's multi-channel.
No, it's not. You still have some more work to do, right?
Because
your homework is to finish this.
Cool.
Because there's still some SPL 0 and 1 going on, and there are many cases where we still have xn2 instead of xn2 of the current channel index. There are still plenty of those to change, or there is at least one. But there are plenty of variables that you have to change like that. And yeah, go ahead and finish that. And I don't think you had a lot of time to do the homework from the previous week, which was to actually design the levels using the multiple filters.
Unfortunately.
And now we even learned how to wire some of the filters conditionally. You may not want to have 2 filters. You may want to have only 1.
Yeah.
So we talked about that in the beginning of the stream. And you don't need to say SPL of current channel index twice in that line. You can just have that once.
Yeah, and honestly, I am not sure if I'll have time this week. Like August and July are usually the worst months, and until like 10th of September, I just have very little disposable time. However, I will do my best. So the things I need to do are design the levels, which I think is easy. I just have to add an extra value to all the filters that would be like this, to all the difficulties. That is disengaged, and then if it's equal to disengage, they are just, that whole code is skipped. Right?
Yep.
And then what else did you say was my homework? Oh, finish the rest of the multi-channel code.
Yeah.
And that's it.
And that's it.
I'll try.
Yeah. All right.
Sure. Thanks everybody for watching. Thank you, John. I really want to buy your video course actually. And yeah, I will do that. And thanks for the help. And sorry that I was dumb, and I'm very happy that I got this sorted, because geez, it takes me sometimes a really long time to do a very simple thing, and then I do it and I'm like, oh, this sucks, delete. So thank you for that. Thanks to Bob's, Fotis, and Bo for watching. And Bo, next week you're on here. You may have already left, but yeah, if you want to be on here next week, please join us. Hopefully having 2 NDIs wouldn't make this a nightmare to stream, but if it did, we'll figure something out.
Yeah, we should do a roundtable with Bo and John and everyone. That would be a lot of fun.
Ton of fun. We can Zoom or do whatever. Somebody else be the master streamer, because I am just out of my mind usually with this stuff.
Yeah, and we could write code together. There is this thing called a coding dojo where people as a group write code. So you write some of the code and a timer goes off, and then you pass the code to the next person, and we all chat and we talk about the design decisions together.
Fun.
And it's a lot of fun. And yeah, we could write some ReaFIR code doing it that way. All right. Yeah, thank you all for thank you, Arya. Thank you all for being active on the chat. That's always fun to be with you all. And I see you tomorrow over at my channel, where we will be recording. I don't know if we'll be recording more guitars or if we'll be recording vocals, but we will continue working on the song that we are working together.
And I will also do a live stream, which is like a post-mortem of my disastrous live stream where I composed the thing for the orchestra, and actually it broke 100 ways, and I streamed for 16 hours and it ate up 4 hours of my stream. I checked and it's not the editor thing. It's just gone. It's weird. So yeah, those are the things that are gonna. Oh, and Dan Worrell. Yeah, Dan Worrell. I'll do anything to be working with Dan Worrell. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. So yeah, you can all get in touch with me on this email address I just posted on the chat, and yeah, let's get this to happen. Yeah, let's do this roundtable thing and maybe even try to write some code together. That could be a lot of fun. Or just talking about coding and talking about ReaFIR could be a lot of fun. In any case, yeah, let's wrap this up. Click the button, Arya.
Adios, everybody. Time of death. As soon as I figure out where it is, time of...
And the last 4 digits of Arya's credit card are 4962.